Welcome to Go a Little Mad, a horror movie podcast. You've probably forgotten, so my name is Jason, and I love scary movies.
I'm Briana, and I don't. And this month, we watched The Babadook.
Samuel. I don't want you to die. It is real. It's real. It's just a book. Where'd you get this? On the shelf. If it's in a word or it's in a look, you can't get rid of the Babadook. Babadook, dook, dook. It wants to scare you first. Then you'll see it.
This monster thing has got to stop.
You can't get rid of the Babadook.
Now, is it Babadook, but it's like Babadook because they're Australian?
I don't know.
I feel like it is.
Babadook.
Are we appropriating by saying Babadook?
It's just an accent, so I think it's okay.
Well, you say it's just an accent, but I'm pretty sure I could do a couple racist accents.
Oh, yeah. Babadook, what are your thoughts?
Well, hold on. Before we get into that, I mean, I feel like we owe these people an explanation.
Oh, yeah.
Our, like, 4 listeners.
Oh, that's right.
About what happened.
You can't say we only have 4. We definitely have more than 4.
We recorded an entire episode for Midsummer. We watched the director's cut. It was like 3 hours long. Briana absolutely hated it.
It was hell. I wrote about it on the blog, so go read it.
Yeah, and, you know, we took a bunch of great notes. We did a lot of research. I think Midsummer was probably the episode I've done the most research for up to this point in the podcast.
Yeah.
And it was a good episode. It probably would have been our longest episode too.
Yeah.
So
I'm still sad.
Yeah, we record like 2 hours worth, which probably get edited down to like an hour and a half maybe. And Briana starts the editing process and the audio is ruined. Lots of skips, lots of stutters, pretty much unusable.
Completely unusable.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know me, I do tech support for a living. It's my job. You know, I'm by no means like an expert, but I do okay. And, you know, Briana turned to me to solve this problem. And I did a bunch of research and we tried a bunch of things. We tried using a different computer. We record on a Mac right now. We tried using a Windows laptop, but the recording equipment that we have was having some compatibility issues with that. And through all of this troubleshooting, yesterday, that'd be Thursday, we were talking about it. And I said, you know...
Wait, what's the first thing that someone, and I'm asking the listeners this, what's the first thing, it's usually a condescending question because the answer is usually yes, that the tech support people always ask if you did or to do, right?
Now, here's my question in response. If you know that, and if you're asking that, expecting everybody to know that, why do I still have to ask it?
Because I don't think about IT when it's not work-related.
So basically, we've been doing this podcast for 9 months, and Briana uses her MacBook to edit it. That's what we record on. And in the 9 months that we have been doing this podcast, and I'm sure longer, she has never shut it down or restarted it once. Restarting it solved all of our issues.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you know it?
I'm devastated. I am humiliated and devastated, but it's fine. We're onward and upward.
And as you could hear by her question a moment ago, she immediately blamed me for not asking that question sooner.
Yes.
I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I guess I learned my lesson and will not do that in the future.
That's correct. And I will yell at you when you do ask me if I did that in the future, because the answer will probably be yes, but it must be asked.
Yeah, and you will accuse me of being condescending.
Yes.
Say, I'm not stupid. Of course I restarted it.
Don't mansplain computers to me.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, it's a fun story now that we're outside of it. And
Maybe.
it's just great to be recording again.
So let's talk about the current movie, which is Babadook. Babadook. I think it's Babadook, right?
Sure.
Anyway, what are your thoughts?
It's a good movie. It's okay. I am not as high on this movie as the horror community at large, and I'm not, going to sit here and be like, my opinion's better or feel superior for feeling different. It's just not for me. And, we'll get into that later. What about you? What did you think?
So this film was actually inadvertently spoiled for me, at least what the underlying metaphor is. And I'm grateful for that, because I think if I had gone into this thinking it's just going to be a horror movie and it's some kind of paranormal thing coming after this family, I would have just been like, what is this? This is stupid. And I would do the thing that I do, which is not really process the metaphor and just look at what's happening on the screen. I have to think about those things after. I've always been like that. So I would have just been really not enjoying it. I think knowing what it all means helped me appreciate it a lot more.
I think you would have gotten there though. That's kind of one of my complaints about this movie is it's a little too
On the nose.
unsubtle. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this movie, Killing Them Softly, starring Brad Pitt. It was an action movie, came out 10 years ago, maybe around the same time as Babadook.
Featuring the Fugees?
No.
Oh, okay.
And that movie was just a big, so it took place right around the time of the 2008 presidential election. And it was just a big metaphor for politics in the world and society. And I remember distinctly walking out of the theater, and I turned to my friend Jeremy and I said, I feel like the last act of that movie, I feel like somebody took a baseball bat and wrote the word subtext on it and then beat me over the head with it for 20 minutes. And that's kind of how I feel about this movie. It's a good movie. It's a good metaphor. But for me personally, it's just, I need a little more subtlety in a metaphor or an allegory. I need a little bit left for me to think about. That was something that I was left wanting with this movie. Again, it's not a bad movie. I just don't think it's the masterpiece that a lot of people do. And that's okay.
Well, let's discuss this masterpiece, not masterpiece. Who wrote it? Who directed it? Jennifer Kent. She did both. It also stars Essie Davis as Amelia and Noah Wiseman as Samuel.
That kid is either a phenomenal actor or a complete menace. There is one or the other.
Perhaps both. I don't know. And that's all I put down for cast. There's a couple other people, but I just didn't think.
No, yeah,
That's really it for the cast.
It's a small cast overall, and it really only focuses on those two. Yeah.
I kind of struggled with the summary. My summary is very simplistic, and it also spoils what's going on in the movie. But a mother and son are haunted and tormented by the personification of grief and depression. That's it. That's what I wrote.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
What did you find for the Rotten Tomato score?
98% critical, 78% audience. So.
And do you want to speak to why it's so high? And because you had told me this is kind of the first of its kind a little bit, I think.
I wouldn't say the first of its kind, but so if you haven't seen it or if you missed Brianna's description just now, The Babadook is a metaphor for depression and for grief and for the way we struggle with mental illness. And it does a good job of kind of showing depression, speaking as somebody who's been in that position. Maybe that's part of the reason I don't like it. Maybe it hits a little too close to home, but it does a good job of that. So horror has always kind of been social commentary, right? Night of the Living Dead by George Romero was an anti-segregation movie, going right back to that. That's one of the first horror movies. So it's not like that concept of using horror to tell another story is, unfamiliar, but I feel like this kind of kickstarted this whole movement that we're seeing a lot of in the folk horror and art horror scene right now of movies that are scary movies about other real subjects. And that's fine, but I do kind of miss the early 2000s, late 90s, horror for the sake of horror. Sometimes I just want to watch a good scary movie and be scared, and I don't want to feel deep despair.
I think I wrote that in one of our blog posts. I was like, where is the horror that is just horror? And I don't want any of it, but I don't want to feel so sad for these people.
Yeah, and it's not like it's still not out there. We've got The Black Phone, which just came out. Barbarian is coming out soon. That's one I'm really looking forward to. That seems to be just a really good scary movie for the sake of being a scary movie. So it's not like those movies completely went away, but it really did kind of bring this whole movement to the forefront for modern movies, at least from my perception. Again, I'm no expert.
And how about your flesh wounds? What'd you find?
So there isn't a ton. It's easier to find some cool trivia for like older movies, but movies that have been made in the internet age, especially movies that have been talked about and dissected the way Babadook has, there isn't a lot out there. So apparently, Babadook means he is coming for sure in Hebrew.
I did read that, yeah.
I read that in 2 separate articles, but I couldn't actually find that like anywhere else. And I tried using like Google Translate, but I also don't know Hebrew, and maybe you have to put in the characters differently than just typing it in. So,
and maybe it's like not an exact translation.
So I couldn't verify that outside of 2 articles that didn't cite anything. But I thought that was neat. And the next one isn't technically about Babadook, really, but it's a really cool look back at horror history. So the look of the Babadook, which, the effects when he was like moving around kind of fast were not scary at all. But that look of him with the top hat.
Yeah, but also like what, I have this in my stuff later, but like what is the Babadook? Because sometimes he's a man in a top hat with long fingers, and sometimes he's a bird with wings. He has wings sometimes.
I don't think he has wings. I think that's just like his coat like flowing as he glides or flies.
I have wingspan in my notes later. I don't know. I saw wings. Maybe it's just me.
I'm not confident enough to like officially refute that, but I don't think he has wings. But yeah, so he's a man with a large top hat, almost like stovepipe hat, like Abe Lincoln style. Long arms with fingers kind of straight down at his side, fingers out, and hair that comes down, to his shoulders. That look was inspired by Lon Chaney, who was a well-known silent film actor, and his character in the 1927 film London After Midnight. His character had that long stringy hair. He wore the hat. He had those big wide eyes that the Babadook had. If you should find a picture of him and put it up on our Instagram along with this, because it is, side by side, it is unmistakably. This is notable for a few reasons. London After Midnight was directed by Todd Browning, who was one of, if not the first big-time horror movie director. He's often called the Edgar Allan Poe of cinema. His 1931 Dracula is considered to be the first talkie horror film. And 1932's Freaks is generally held to be his best work now and one of the best, quote, horror movies ever. Though, like many, it wasn't so well received at the time and, in effect, ended his career. He only made 4 more movies after none of them were well received, and 7 years after Freaks came out, he was out of the business entirely.
Dang.
Lon Chaney, for his part, also has a big horror pedigree. He was called the Man of 1,000 Faces because he did his own makeup, and he was incredibly skilled at it. And this was, this is the 20s, the 30s. This is early cinema. There were no big makeup artists or things like that. He was just a guy that brought a kit to set and made himself look a certain way. He was the star of 1923's Hunchback of Notre Dame, which was not like a fun Disney movie, and 1925's Phantom of the Opera, playing the Phantom. And then 1927, he did London After Midnight. He would die just a few years later in 1930 due to lung cancer. He had a son named Creighton, who would later change his name to Lon Chaney Jr., and Lon Chaney Jr. would pick up his father's mantle, most famously playing the Wolfman in The Wolfman. But he's also played pretty much every classic monster there was, from Dracula to Frankenstein to The Mummy. Do you remember a few years ago when that Tom Cruise Mummy movie came out? And that was like an attempt to like launch the Universal monster franchise again. Do you remember that at all?
I remember the movie vaguely.
Well, the movie sucked, and it was a flop, and nothing else ever came of it. But Lon Chaney Jr. basically was that franchise. I'm not exaggerating. He was Dracula. He was Frankenstein. He was the Wolfman.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, not really about the Babadook, but that's like a cool homage to some really serious movie history. One thing I didn't write here that I'm really surprised that I read was the last thing is that film, London After Midnight, was actually lost. There is like a reconstructed version that was put together through like footage that they had, but the original cut of the film was destroyed and could never be seen again.
Who? Why? What?
I think it was a fire. I don't remember. Like I said, I surprisingly didn't write it down. But yeah, so that's
cool.
neat. So those are my
History.
facts that have nothing to do with the Babadook.
Well, I have one that does have to do with the Babadook.
Yeah, please.
Jennifer Kent, and you'll really appreciate this, has insisted that there will never be a sequel.
I love that. I was going to talk about that towards the end there.
Okay.
Absolutely love that. I mean, sometimes you tell a story and there's no more story to be told, and that's okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Love her for that. True queen.
I have no touch points for this, as with all of the modern ones. For sure, I have no memories and no touch points. But what about you?
Had you heard of this before we talked about it?
You know, when you suggested we watch it, I was like, oh, yeah, okay. But I feel like there's lots of... I remember my first question was, is it one of those movies where if you say the name a certain number of times, like it comes or whatever?
I remember you asked me that. You were very concerned about it.
So I was really nervous about that. If I did know it, I think it was just in the realm of like these kinds of films come out with these names of these ghouls and the end.
Ghouls. So for my part, I'd seen it once before we watched this. I saw it on demand. I think it was on like Netflix shortly after it came out. I remember there being a lot of hype around it. You know, people talking about it as, you know, the best horror movie in years, blah, blah. I watched it and, you know, it was good. I kind of already have spoiled my review a little bit, but it didn't quite live up to the hype for me. It's a good movie. It's just not transcendent in a way that a lot of people, maybe my hopes were too high before I saw it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, well, shall we talk about it?
Let's do it.
We begin with a close-up face of an older woman, obviously in distress. And I'm going to keep the word older woman there, even though it's false, because that's what I wrote, and that's how she looked.
She is like our age.
No, I know. But didn't she look old?
We're old.
Maybe just out of... Excuse me. Maybe just out of context. I was like, that's an old woman's face. I don't know. But she's in a car. There's kind of like weird flashes. There's glass shattering. Then she's falling. And it becomes very clear that this is a dream sequence.
And I got to say, like, I did like that shot because it's, you know, obviously they weren't working with a huge budget here.
Yeah.
And that was a very good way to show a car crash without, you know, showing a car crash.
Yeah. And I guess we should say this is an Australian film, right? And they had like a $2 million budget.
Yeah, it's from Australia.
So truly not a big budget. In like the background, someone is calling mom. And then we see like an adult man sitting next to her in the passenger seat. So they're in a car, which I already said. Then she kind of falls onto the bed. Very slow motion, very like dramatic. And it's her son who is trying to wake her up, saying that I had the dream again. First impressions of the kid. This is my first impression with him just saying one line. He has an accent, therefore he is cute.
Not even going to say anything. You could just play that laughter.
And also, the woman is not older. She is just extremely tired. That's all.
Heard that.
It's still night, so Amelia, that's the mom, she kind of goes with her son, Sam, through the house or through his room, looking under the bed for, you know, monsters, in the closet, in the wardrobe. Then she reads him a book, and they end up falling asleep together. There's like this whole sequence of him shifting around on the bed and then grinding his teeth. Oh my God.
I like, you look visibly upset right now.
Yeah.
When we were watching this movie, I always write your exact quotes when you say things when we're watching movies. That's the worst thing I've ever fucking seen. That's what you said. You did not like get comfortable for like another 15 minutes. You like kept like moving and just like shaking it off, and
I don't know if
you
it's
hated it.
Coming through the sound, but like it makes my teeth chatter. It makes my whole body like shudder.
Yeah,
the sound of grinding teeth is the worst.
That sound does not do that to me, but we all have those sounds. We all know.
I'm cold now. Okay.
And another thing I just want to mention about the way they're laying, he is like practically choking her.
Oh,
his like hand and arm is like around her neck. Like, it's not a malicious thing. He is her backpack.
Yeah.
It cannot be comfortable for her.
An alarm goes off. Downstairs, Sam is already awake. He's using tools to like build something, put something together.
Got a great Briana quote for that scene as he's like building.
What?
Is that the fucking kid using tools? No. Yes.
Well, he's definitely using tools that he shouldn't be using.
You had a filthy mouth during this movie. That is 2 back-to-back F-bombs.
Well, it was the teeth. It just, She's ignoring the alarm, Amelia, until something crashes downstairs, like something breaking sounding. So she rushes downstairs to find that Sam has built like a weapon, essentially. In the process of trying to show her how it works, he breaks a window.
God, this kid is the worst. If you haven't seen this movie, if we haven't made that clear yet by my laughter when Brianna said he was cute, he will make your life hell for the next like hour of this movie.
If you like read a Reddit thread, like I read a little bit of a Reddit thread on this movie, or like any kind of reviews, it's either, wow, this movie is so great, or that is the most annoying kid I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, and I mean, both can be true.
Yeah.
But I understand why that kid would ruin the movie for somebody.
Yeah.
Oh,
like some of the folks on Reddit said they didn't even finish the movie. They turned it off because he's so annoying, which I get it.
I don't blame them at all.
Cut to her sewing a sequined cape on to Sam. He's like a magician, and he's going on about monsters. She tells him that he has to stop talking about the monsters. It's very clear Sam has a very active imagination and overall exhausts his mother.
Or does he have an overactive imagination?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. The scene ends with him hugging her tight, and she harshly says, "Don't do that." Unclear why. It's like never explained.
Yeah, I think it was just he just hugged her too tight, and she just got uncomfortable with it because she's miserable.
I guess, yeah. Next, he gets dropped off at school, and she goes to work at like a nursing home. We meet a coworker who is clearly sweet on her, and her day gets interrupted by Sam's school calling. She goes to the school to find out that he brought a dart gun to school. His behavior has been like a repeated issue, and the school's basically fed up, saying that he has significant behavioral problems and he needs to have a monitor. Again, this is Australian, so I think a monitor is basically meaning that he's going to be separated from the rest of the kids and is going to have like a dedicated aide, essentially.
Yeah, that's what the principal or the dean or, whatever, chancellor. Yeah, the chancellor. That's what he says. And, I am not a child expert or even amateur, really. I know nothing about children. But just like my instincts say that like taking a kid who is having social issues and isolating him from the other kids is probably not the best solution, right?
Well, the teacher's there as well, and she says that she has 24 other children to take care of. And this is true. And what the lesson here is that teachers need more support, they need to be paid more, and they need more aides in the classroom.
That's absolutely the lesson here. But I just, the chancellor specifically used the word isolate. There has to be a special ed classroom or something just with some other children. So he isn't just him and his adult all day.
But I mean, if he is violent and if he is scaring the other children because he can't stop talking about monsters, that's a huge disruption.
Oh, for sure. I don't disagree. Again, I'm not saying I know the answer. I'm just saying that sounds wrong to me.
Yeah.
That kid's going to be even more messed up by going through the next 10 years of school with no friends but a monitor.
Yeah. They keep calling him the boy. They keep referring to him as the boy.
Oh, the boy.
And that triggers the mom. She gets very upset over that and is like, why are you treating him like this? Treat him like a human being, or I'll find another school. In the car ride home, Sam says that Mrs. Bowen hates me, which is his teacher. And Amelia tells him that's not true.
Probably true.
I mean, every teacher has the one,
She goes home after class and it's just like, that fucking Samuel again.
She also tells Sam not to tell Auntie Claire, who is her sister, it seems.
That kind of stuck up a red flag for me because that is not good modeling for a child. One podcast that we listen to, or I listen to at least, and you listen to with me sometimes, is Last Podcast on the Left. And we were recently listening to the Casey Anthony episodes. And they were talking about how when Casey Anthony didn't graduate high school, she failed her last class and she wanted to lie about it. And when her mother found out the truth, her mother was like, yes, lie about it. Tell everyone you graduated and we'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
And that's Casey Anthony. She is parenting like Casey Anthony's mom. Just saying.
Well, don't put that on her. She's clearly struggling.
She is. I'm just saying that's how you get a Casey Anthony.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Not that she did anything wrong. She was acquitted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they said. They stop at a grocery store, and while Amelia is in the checkout, Sam is like playing with another kid that he met. That other kid's mom comes over, and Sam starts talking to the mom. His mom comes back and is like, oh, don't bother this woman. And she's like, oh, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But we've got to go home and see daddy now, like to her child. And then Sam's like, my daddy's in the cemetery. That poor mother is just like, I don't know what to say to this stranger child. And he goes on to say that it's because his dad died in a car crash, bringing his mom to the hospital to give birth to him. He says all of that to a stranger.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. This scene does give us some background. The dad is dead, how it happened. It also explains the dream sequence that we saw at the beginning, and also why Amelia is so incredibly exhausted. Her son is like 6 or 7, so it's been about that time, obviously. And if you haven't already learned, Sam is a lot. At the park, Claire and Amelia are trying to talk, but Sam is like climbing on stuff, and he's doing that thing that every kid does, which is like, Mom, 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 watch this. And it's like a skip, and you're like, wow, great job. But he keeps doing it, and he's screaming, and he's so loud, and they are just trying to have a conversation.
And this is when you turned on him. I feel like he was kind of annoying you a little bit, but you're like, he's a troubled kid, it's fine.
Yeah.
But this was when you looked at me and you were like, this kid is so annoying. And it's just like, we're not even 15 minutes into this movie. You've got another 90 minutes.
He's continuing to climb on this like metal thing, and I don't know if it's monkey bars or what, but it's like a bar on one and a bar on another, and then there's one across, obviously. So he's climbing and trying to get to the very top of that bar, while Amelia and Claire are having this like heated conversation about Claire's daughter, Ruby. Typically, Ruby and Sam have a shared birthday party every year, which is coming up. But Ruby has said that she doesn't want to share her birthday with Sam, probably because he's so annoying. And
yeah, I wouldn't want to share my birthday party with that kid.
No.
Absolutely not.
The scene kind of escalates with Sam calling and calling and calling his mom over and over again, while their conversation gets more and more tense. And it eventually stops because of Sam screaming for his mother's attention while he is on top of the bar that connects the two sides. So he's very high on a very narrow bar. They both jump up and the scene cuts. The next scene is him in the car screaming. But he has no injuries. They don't go to the hospital. They don't talk about any injuries.
No, he's screaming because she made him leave.
Screaming.
Because he almost swan dived off the jungle gym. Swan dove? Swan dived.
Swan dived. It's terrible.
Okay, again, we are less than 15 minutes into this movie. I have no idea how they stretched this into 90.
Yeah.
I'm already like ready for this movie to be over.
Yeah. On the way into the house, we meet just the sweetest old lady. We learn later that her name is Mrs. Roach. She's their neighbor. She looks at Sam and she asks, have you been in the wars today? I love this woman because he looks so tired. In the house, the dog is scratching at a door. They have a dog, everyone. So I wonder what happens to the dog. Yeah. Do you wonder? So I don't anymore. When there's an animal, we know.
Yeah, you turned at me and you said, does the dog die? I said, yes. And you yelled at me. You said, of course the dog dies. Why else have a pet in a horror movie?
Exactly.
Well, it's because a pet is easy. It's because we automatically empathize with a pet. So it's something that can be killed to elicit an emotional reaction without having to spend all the effort of building a character.
It's cheap writing. It's cheap.
It is. It's absolutely cheap writing because, you can make us care about a person and then make us sad, but you just put a dog and that dog existing will make us sad if they die.
It's true.
So it's just an easy way to get us to feel it, I guess.
Yeah. So the dog is scratching at a door that I assume leads to the basement, and the mom kind of looks at the door and acknowledges that it's locked. This felt reminiscent of a scene where like a family has just moved into what is inevitably a haunted house, and they're like, oh, this door is locked. I wonder why. Obviously, she's lived in this house for years, so that's not the case. We'll find out later why she is weird about the door. After a silent dinner, it's another scene of them checking under the bed and then reading a book. She tells Sam that he can pick out whatever book he wants, and he pulls out a large red book off of the shelf called Mr. Babadook. Amelia asks, where did you get this? Now, this child is 6 or 7, and she's been grieving for this whole time. So I feel like she would just know where her son's book collection comes from.
Well, I would argue the exact opposite. Because she's been depressed and grieving, she might just not remember buying it for him. And she's just like, Wait, where'd this come from? I don't remember this.
If you don't know how the kid got the book, don't fucking read it. That's the lesson of this movie.
Well, I agree with that. 100% I agree with that. I'm just saying, if I look back at, the times in my life where I really struggled with depression, my memories are much fuzzier than my normal memories.
Yeah, I guess. The book is, I describe it as adorable yet scary because it starts off innocent, I feel like. It's not very threatening and it rhymes. So it's cute,
It rhymes, so it's cute, yeah.
And then she's...
Nothing that rhymes could be evil.
Right, just like accent equals cute kid. It's the same. She's weirded out by it a lot faster than he is and asks if he wants to read another book, but he whines, "You said I could pick it," so she goes on. It starts to take some dramatic and horrific turns. She then starts reading through the pages to herself, and the gist of the book is that the Babadook will knock, and when you let him in, you can't get him out. He'll unveil his disguise, and you'll wish you were dead. Except with rhymes.
Sounds about right.
And pop-up imagery, which is also why it's cute. While she's reading and the book is escalating, Sam's panic is also escalating. Already being afraid of monsters, he's very frightened, and he keeps screaming, "Is it under the bed? Mom, Mom!" And then it cuts to her reading another book while he is in her lap, screaming, crying. I don't know if it's because she took the book away or if it's because he's scared now.
It's both. He got scared, so she stopped reading, and then he got angry that she took the book away.
Right.
Because that is how this child works.
Later that night, Mom reads the book to herself alone and then freaks out. She puts it on the top of her wardrobe in the back and then goes back downstairs to watch TV. Bored with TV, she goes upstairs to use her vibrator.
Yeah. And okay, maybe I'm telling myself a little bit here, but like, that thing's huge. It's like a jackhammer. I've seen my share, and it's not, obscenely large. I feel like a mom in her situation maybe wants something a little more discreet.
I feel like it was so that we would know exactly what it was immediately.
That's true. Like, oh, is that lipstick? Oh, no.
Yeah. But Sam wakes up, and then he starts looking toward his open closet, like very alarmed. He pulls a baseball bat out from under his pillow, or a baseball from under his pillow. A baseball, and throws it, right? And then at the most inopportune time, if you get my drift, Sam wakes up and bursts into her room.
I don't get the drift. Could you explain it to me, please?
No, I won't. No.
Such a prude.
He says the Babadook is in his room, and she says, "No, this is not happening," and kind of like pushes him down in the bed. And he says that he'll always protect her, and she kind of just laughs it off.
The only thing he's protecting her from is having an orgasm.
Later, he falls asleep, and she says she stays up to read. There's like a knocking and a creaking, which she literally acknowledges and then puts her book down, lays down, and that's it.
And she in this scene and the entire movie, she sleeps with the covers over her head.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like a trauma thing or what, but like I could never.
Never.
Absolutely not ever.
No, never. Sam wakes her up at 9, which is late because he can't go to school. He has to stay with Auntie Claire, and she reminds him that there is to be no monster talk and no Babadook talk. At work, she's hosting bingo, and the patients, I guess maybe they have dementia, that's what I read, are not very attentive, understandably. This has to be kind of difficult for her to work with, so she just kind of starts reading numbers that aren't real, like, who has 1 billion D76? Who has that? Anyone? And her boss notices, unfortunately.
Way to just like gloss over elder abuse, Briana. Wow.
That's exactly what I was doing. She goes into the break room. The coworker friend encourages her to go home. To cover for her reason for being late, she said that her son was sick.
Yeah, his name is Robbie. He's so nice.
Oh, yeah.
Robbie's a nice boy.
Robbie.
Yeah. He's like, I'll cover for you. That crazy old lady, the one who like caught her being mean at bingo, being bad at bingo. He's like, she goes home after lunch. I can cover for you. Just go home. Go be with your sick kid.
Well,
and
instead
she
of
goes and gets ice cream.
Going home, she goes to the mall and enjoys some peace and quiet for herself.
Honestly, good for her.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that journey for her.
So that moment of peace is fleeting because when she gets into her car, she sees like a couple across the parking lot in their car getting all kissy, and she just watches until they notice her watching.
Yeah, she makes some pretty intense eye contact with the girl, actually. It's
because she's dissociating, essentially, as she stares at them. But then she notices that she has 10 missed calls from Claire. She gets to Claire's house, and Claire is just screaming at her about how Sam scared Ruby, talking about the Babadook. Sam insists that it's real, and in the kind of altercation, he throws firecrackers down onto the ground. In the car, she asks him where he got those, and he says, "You bought them for me on the internet." And she says, "Well, that's the end of the internet," which is just really funny. But I thought this would be a good spot because thanks to the internet, the Babadook is a gay icon. Did you know this?
I did not know this.
Yeah. I learned this briefly when I was getting like an image of the movie for some promo that I was doing. Then I mentioned it on our Instagram stories because I didn't look into it. I just saw like headlines and I was like, why is the Babadook a gay icon? Hope Mess Tom, shout out to them. They responded telling me it was a mistake by Netflix, and then the internet just ran with it, as the internet does.
Oh, so they put it in the LGBTQ like category?
Yes. Mistakenly characterized the film as an LGBTQ movie. And the community responded in jest, asking, what if the Babadook was actually gay? Apparently at pride parades, people get dressed up as the Babadook. A fan dressed up as the Babadook for the red carpet season finale of RuPaul's Drag Race. Some suggest that his boyfriend is Pennywise from It. Lots of articles have been written about it, including one from Vox in 2017 titled "How the Babadook Became the LGBTQ Icon We Didn't Know We Needed." And the subline of that is how terrorizing a white Australian family became an act of queer defiance, which is written by Alex Abad Santos. One quote from the article: "Mr. Babadook, as the figure is referred to in the movie, is queer in the most empirical sense. Its existence is defiance, and it seeks to break down the borders of acceptability and establishment." A Twitter user is quoted in the article saying, "I mean, he created a pop-up book of himself for the drama of it all." I understand that. Neither of us are queer, so we're not going to be arguing the point, but I will say it eases my fears of him, even if his partner is one of the most terrifying clowns ever created.
I feel like you just said we're not going to argue the point was telling me not to argue the point. I feel like you're like, Jason, we're not going to argue the point.
No, I just mean we have no opinion. We have no stake in this game.
I mean, I don't remember giving you permission to speak for me.
That's what I do. I'm going to link the article, though, that I read in the show notes because it is like an interesting and fun article. I'll post it on our Instagram as well. For the record, writer and director Jennifer Kent, she's on board. She told the Bloody Disgusting blog, "Of course, I love that story."
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fully on board too. I wasn't arguing with you because I intended to argue with you.
Oh, I know. You're just being contrarian as you are.
How dare you? I am not.
At home, while Amelia prepares dinner, Sam is in the basement causing a ruckus. The dog runs out. Bugsy is the dog. He runs out from the basement, and that's when she realizes that Sam is in the basement. So this is the door that was locked that the dog was scratching at earlier. She had it locked because it's where she's put all of her husband's things, and she's very upset that he's been down there playing with it all. She grabs the key away from him, which he did steal somehow, and then the doorbell rings. It's Robbie, the nice coworker, delivering flowers for her and a game for Sam. He says to Sam something like, hope you feel better. And Sam cannot play it cool because he's like 6. So he's like, oh, well, I wasn't sick. So she has to come out with it. I don't know when Robbie leaves in this scene.
I was going to say the same thing. I have no idea. And this is also, I believe, the last we see of Robbie the entire movie.
For sure, yeah.
He is just like scared off by the craziness.
Because she loses it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Saying that Sam is so disobedient that he can't go to school and he throws a fit. And at some point, Robbie's gone.
And honestly, like if you're Robbie in that situation, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
I brought you flowers and then like I'm standing here watching this exchange and I'm going to leave. And that's no judgment. She is grieving. She's a single mom that is trying her best and she is struggling. And I understand that, but that's why she shouldn't be dating. So Robbie needs to leave.
Yeah, exactly. Amelia goes downstairs to clean up the mess. He was basically performing magic for his dad. There's a picture of both of them set up, Amelia and the dad. And she gets scared by a suit jacket that's hung up with a hat that is very much set up like a person is standing there. Like it's almost like the arm of the jacket is pinned. So it looks like someone's standing there.
Yeah, and when I was watching it, like my first thought was that like Samuel set that up, like to be like,
too.
This is me performing for my dad.
Yeah.
But We see that a couple times throughout the movie, so I think it's more a representation of the Babadook.
Yeah, a dapper beast with his top hat. That night, as they eat dinner, she pulls something out of her mouth. It's glass. There's glass all up in her soup, but not his. Sam says it was the Babadook, and she makes him leave to go watch a DVD, quote unquote. Very insistent on saying DVD and not movie, which I just found very interesting. Go watch a DVD. That's so specific. Just say movie or TV.
I don't know. I feel like when we were kids, or at least when I was a kid, my parents would say, go watch a tape. They'd say that all the time.
Yeah, I just don't remember switching to DVD and not just saying movie.
And maybe also that's an Australian thing.
Maybe.
We're not from there. We don't know.
He puts in a magic show DVD that's like instructing him on how to do magic. Later, she's heading upstairs and she sees him go into a room, so she follows. Now, he didn't actually go into this room, right? Or did he? No, because she sees him later. So she finds a picture of her and her husband. It's the same one that was down in the basement, but with their faces scratched out. She goes to him and asks, "Do you think this is funny?" And he responds by picking up his weapons. He's ready to fight, but she grabs it from him, like has to fight him off really for it. He pushes her and asks, "Do you want to die?" And then grabs the weapon from her and runs out. He is in army mode. She sits alone at the table. Lights flash. Sam is upstairs in his room, like breathing heavily, looking at his wardrobe, afraid. He approaches it and his eyes are wide, and then he screams. Amelia runs upstairs to find that the wardrobe has toppled over, but she finds Sam under the bed repeating, "Don't let it in." Then she finds the book, the Babadook book, which Sam would not have been able to find himself.
So where'd it come from?
She rips it up and throws it in the rubbish.
In the rubbish.
Yeah. In bed, the lights flicker again. There's a loud rumbling, even louder than the night before. She lays down, just covers her face again until she wakes up in the morning to Sam asking if they have to go to Ruby's party.
And let me just reiterate, if you sleep with the covers over your head, you're an absolute psychopath. There is no gray area there that is inexcusable.
I get why he didn't want to go to Ruby's party because it looks like a massive bore. We come to it as she opens like the last gift and she says, "Mom, I've already got this." Like a brat. It's like a Barbie. And Claire says, "Well, now she has a twin," which is the correct answer.
Absolutely correct answer. And Samuel's the only boy here. This is a girl's party, like through and through.
Right.
Yeah.
The girls go off to play, and Amelia has to literally peel Sam off of her lap and force him to go play. The other moms try to make small talk, asking Amelia what she does for work. And Claire says that she's a writer. So they tell her, like, oh, you should get back to writing. You should do that. One of them says, "I work with disadvantaged women, and some of them have lost their husbands too. It's so hard."
These women are all awful.
Yeah,
They're just super condescending in the way that only middle-aged privileged women can be.
I also think it's just like, we don't know what to say. It's been 7 years. What do we say? I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also hard too because so Ruby and Sam obviously either share a birthday or they're very close together. Mm-hmm. They're very close together. So Samuel's birthday is there, which means that's also the anniversary of her husband's death. And, that's something that I struggled with, losing somebody that I love very much, and then the anniversary of that. It's always kind of a rough couple days for me, And obviously, in the context of this movie, we're led to believe that it's not just the timing. Like, this is a constant thing. But maybe I tend to be more forgiving towards people who really struggle with grief because I hated these women and I wanted to light the house on fire.
Oh, well, yeah, they were annoying. And also they're Claire's friends. So Claire probably talks shit all the time about her sister who's just a mess. So they know everything, Outside, Sam is in the treehouse alone and Ruby climbs up just to tell him to get out. They argue and Ruby says that he's annoying and that no one loves him. And she's extremely, extremely mean to him. And he ends up pushing her out of the treehouse. And
she deserved it.
She deserved it.
She deserved it. She was saying, I don't remember exactly what she was saying, but it was like, your dad died because he didn't want to be with you.
Yeah.
Like, you have no dad. You have no dad.
Yeah.
You have no dad. And then he just shoves her out of the treehouse. And honestly, good for him. I absolutely hate this child, but I was rooting for him every moment of this scene.
And she's seemingly fine. She has a bloody nose. We find out later she does need surgery, but like she's fine. Okay?
He broke her nose. Whatever. It's
Yeah.
fine.
While the kids were arguing, though, Claire and Amelia are also getting into it. Amelia says the friends were pitying her, and Claire is like, it's been 7 years since your husband died, and you need to get over it. And Amelia says, I have moved on. I don't talk about him. I don't make this a burden for you. Like, what's the problem here? How does this affect you, is like what she says. And Claire says that the whole thing is depressing and she can't stand Sam. And then she says that Amelia can't stand her own son either.
Which, like, okay, that last part, that's true and fair.
But don't
like,
say it.
Yeah, you don't say it. And the whole, like, you need to move on or, like, get over it. I don't care if it's been 7 years. That is completely unacceptable.
I think what we learn about Amelia is that she hasn't dealt with this appropriately. And I don't mean appropriately because there is no appropriate way, but she hasn't done anything to help herself.
Oh, no, I completely agree. And she does need to move on. But that advice does not need to come from her
Yeah,
sister when she's
yeah.
angry.
But I think what this scene also kind of illustrates or puts pretty clearly is that Amelia thinks that being silent about her experience, her feelings, his death, his life in general, she thinks that's what moving on is. So that's what I meant by like she's not dealing with this appropriately.
Yeah.
We've seen it a few times. So we see it when she tries to get Sam to not talk about it. The fact that she keeps the basement door locked and all that stuff locked up in there, that's not moving on. It's just stuffing it down.
Yeah.
And she's been stuffing it down for 7 years.
And the other thing that this scene really highlighted for me too was how alone Amelia is, or
Yeah.
at least feels, because Claire is her only friend, her only even tiny shred of support system in the
Right.
entire world. And obviously that's very strained. So all she has is these memories of her husband and her child who she can't stand to look at.
Right. But like the
Yikes.
Babadook being what it is, it's like it's time now because there's just no more room for her to stuff this down anymore.
Yeah.
So in the car on the way home, Sam is screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming. And she pulls over and screams back saying, "Why can't you just be normal?" Now he looks next to him as though someone is there and he screams repeatedly, "Get out, get out." Then he basically has what looks like a seizure.
Yeah, that was a seizure for sure.
So the mom feels real bad for finally yelling at him.
I think just pause real briefly and just point out the fact that, in a lot of the discussions around this movie and about this movie, people discuss Samuel, about maybe he's on the autism spectrum or maybe he has ADHD. And that's never really addressed or talked about in the film at all, and I just kind of wanted to pause and acknowledge that because like, as we like call this child annoying over and over again, we certainly don't intend any sort of offense or lack of understanding or anything like that. I mean, this is a character who was written for a movie that was supposed to be grating.
Well, right. And that was kind of my issue with the whole thing. Is that just people interpreting it that way who maybe have that experience themselves so they know? Because otherwise we're just like, this kid's annoying. So
Yeah.
just, I guess I would have watched it differently if I had that thought. you
Yeah.
know?
And I just kind of wanted to pause and point it out because I didn't want anybody listening to this to think like, oh my God, these people would like just sit here and denigrate an autistic child for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Like, not what we're doing or trying to do at least.
Right. And either way, I mean, if you think about it, regardless of if he's on the spectrum or has ADHD or anything, what he definitely has is a mother who has been grieving for 7 years for his entire life.
Yeah. And she has enabled a lot of the less productive behaviors.
Yeah. So he's not going to be quote unquote normal because he doesn't have any kind of typical life at this time.
Yeah.
Well, at the hospital, the doctor says that what happened was basically his brain heated up really quickly, but he'll be fine. I think that's how he's describing a seizure.
Yeah, so that's if you get a fever that's high enough,
Yeah.
you do have a seizure. And he was saying like his brain got real hot, he had a seizure, but we can't find any underlying cause that would have caused that to happen. So it's probably just an anomaly. Like shit happens.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing when your child has, a brain issue, but I'm not a doctor, so I guess I'll take his word for it.
Yeah. He says he's definitely into monsters, and Amelia is just crying. She's just weeping. She's like, yeah, too much into monsters. And she just admits that neither of them are doing well. They need help. And he recommends a psychiatrist. And she's like, yes, sure. But also, how about what can you do for now? Give me a pill.
Yeah, and there's a whole discussion to be had about whether we medicate children too much, but that kid could probably use a sedative.
That night, he takes a pill and asks if it will make the Babadook go away. And she says, yes, but you can't mention again, promise. And he says, I promise to protect you if you promise to protect me. Not what she said. But I also need to know, like, why does he constantly think she needs to be protected? Like, how does he even know what that means?
I think it's that kid thing where he can tell that, his mother is haunted, for lack of a better word. And he's a son who wants to protect his mother.
Amelia has the same dream from the beginning, but she wakes up at 11 a.m. She checks on Sam, and he's still sleeping. I was like, is he going to be dead? But he's not. She's smiling, almost like blissful. She heads downstairs toward the kitchen, and her bliss is interrupted by a knock. She opens the door, and guess what, guys? There's no one there. Shocking. She closes the door, and there's another knock, this one louder. She opens the door, and while there's no one there again, the Babadook book is on the ground, all put together again.
Crazy.
She looks through it, and it's different. It says, the more you deny, the stronger I get. You start to change when I get in. And now it has pop-up illustrations of her, looking like her, killing their dog, killing a kid, Sam, and then killing herself.
And I will say, as much as I am indifferent about a lot of this movie, I love the book. I think the book is a very creepy thing. It's used very well.
Yeah, totally.
It's the best part of the movie for me.
She responds by lighting the book on fire outside, and Sam sees this. Later, she receives a call from Claire. Ruby does need surgery. She offers to pay, but Claire's like, oh, you can't even pay your own bills.
Claire's a bitch.
Now, one of the points from Claire in their argument earlier at Ruby's birthday party was that Amelia never shares her life with Claire. So Amelia shares her life. She tells her that she thinks someone is stalking them, and she explains what happened with the book. Claire, with exasperation, says, Amelia, call the police. I don't have time for this. So that's what Amelia gets when she shares her life.
Yeah, but at least when she goes to the police, she gets a lot of help.
Yeah, well, first, she walks away from the phone, and the camera lingers on that spot, and the phone rings again. She picks it up, assuming it's Claire, but it's not. It's the Babadook, saying its name with a horrible sound. This was probably the scariest part for me.
Do you want me to do it, or will it bother you? I can do it.
Go ahead, you can do it.
Babadook.
I hate it.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I hate it a lot.
It's creepy.
So that makes Amelia head straight to the police.
Oh, yeah, just, my Briana quote for any moment. Nope. It's very loudly, very suddenly, very succinct. Just nope.
The police don't really believe her, especially since she burned the book, which is the only piece of evidence.
That's fair, but the way they're looking at her and the way they're talking to her is offensive. I wanted to leap into the movie and just slap them.
Yeah. Over the cop's shoulder, she sees a top hat and a jacket on a coat rack, which freaks her out. She leaves quickly. Was that there or not? I feel like the lines are blurred, and they continue to get blurred from now.
Yeah, I mean,
henceforth.
I think it was there in that it was the Babadook haunting her. I don't think it was a cop's real clothing. I don't think anybody would wear that top hat. But I do think it was there, yeah.
Sam was left with Mrs. Roach, the sweet neighbor.
Wait, actually, let me just go back real quick, though. Because these cops, yes, she burned the book, and they can't help her. But she's also pretty clearly having issues. I feel like that's the sort of thing where, they should have checked on the kids or something. You know what I mean? If a woman comes in and she says, someone is stalking me and my son, and she seems wild-eyed and crazy, and I don't have any evidence because I burned the book, and then she very suddenly is like, never mind, and bolts out the door.
Yeah.
You're not going to follow up on that? Oh, my God.
Well,
it's just so much paperwork, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. When
When Amelia picks up Sam from Mrs. Roach's house, Mrs. Roach kind of, I think she starts to talk about her husband, Amelia's husband.
Yeah.
And she just snaps at her. She's like, do you have to talk about him all the time? And like goes inside. She's cleaning the kitchen later and she sees a roach. She figures out that it's coming out from under the fridge. When she moves the fridge, she discovers a hole in the wall and the roaches are just coming out of it.
So gross.
So gross. While vigorously cleaning the entire kitchen, there's a knock. It's community services, which is like child services. It's a man and a woman, and they are very rude to the mother. But the woman approaches Sam very sweetly, asking how he is. And he says that he's tired from the drugs Mom gave me. Just about the worst thing you could say.
Okay, so I probably shouldn't say this. It's probably going to get me in trouble. But at this point in the movie, I'm thinking, maybe just let them take him.
Yeah.
You know, just let them take Sam, start your life over, move to a new city.
Oh, you mean forever?
Forever. Move to a new city, change your name, maybe start a new family, or maybe not. Maybe just be like a swinging bachelorette for a while.
Yeah.
Like, this is your out, girl, okay? Just let them take him and you leave.
She doesn't. She explains that they're prescribed from a doctor. The woman asks for water and they follow her to the kitchen. So she is now forced to explain the mess and the hole in the wall. But when they look at it, there's no hole.
She kind of like covers it up real quick. She's like, there was a hole in the wall paper.
Yeah.
A hole in the wall paper. And they just like buy that. And they're like, okay, well, we'll be back in a couple weeks to check on you guys. And they just go. Which, again, like, I feel like this is the same as the cops, where it's just like, she is clearly having an issue. You have to address this. You can't just, well, hope that kid's still alive in 2 weeks.
I know. Yeah.
But again, it's probably
not
just
helpful.
so much paperwork.
Yeah. While doing dishes, she looks out the window into the neighbor's house, which she did in another scene as well. So this is just a thing she does, and she smiles. The neighbor's just watching TV. When she looks again, though, she sees the Babadook in the woman's house. Sam interrupts her, saying that he wants to go to bed, and when she looks again, the Babadook is gone.
And you like gasped at this, and I think this was like your first like real scare of the movie.
Well,
And we're like an hour in.
I was thinking he was going to kill the sweet old neighbor, and I didn't want him to. She ends up forcing Sam to stay awake, though, I think because she's afraid. That night, the wind is strong. It sounds really spooky. The lights flicker. And when she finishes reading a story, the story, eventually to put Sam to bed, he's already asleep. That's how tired he was. Later that night, she hears metal scraping sounds and the dog barking. She decides it's just the dog, and she lets him in. But then it happens again. And then the door opens on its own.
The door opening, I just had, I was so impressed. I wrote it down. The squeaky hinge noise is perfect.
Yeah.
Like A+ textbook squeaky hinge.
Mm-hmm.
Like whoever did Foley, I think that's what it's called. Whoever
Yeah.
did the Foley work on this movie deserves an award just for that hinge. That should be shown in classes. It was incredible.
There's weird noises also, and then something in the doorway. She lays down and covers her face again with the blankets.
Unbelievable. Just, you're asking to get murdered.
Yeah. It says Babadook 3 times, and then I wrote it's flying around the room.
It was like crawling across the ceiling is what I saw.
And eventually falls from the ceiling into her mouth.
Yeah. And so when it's like crawling around the ceiling, it like crawls in that fast forward style that like you see in a million things. And you immediately were like, that looked terrible.
Yeah.
And it did.
The effects are
Yeah.
subpar, but it's okay. She immediately gets up, turns on all the lights, and brings Sam downstairs with her.
One thing that I think is worth noting in this scene is that, she wakes up and you're like, oh, was that a dream? But the door was open. Mm-hmm. The bedroom door was open. So did she leave it open, or
Right.
did the Babadook come in and enter her body through her mouth?
From Screen Rant, I learned that the sound of the Babadook was in part a dragon call sound effect from a video game called Warcraft 2 Beyond the Dark Portal.
Great game.
Do you know that game?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Warcraft is what World of Warcraft is based off of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In various scenes, other sounds from video games were used, including UFO, Enemy Unknown, Mortal Kombat 3, and Resident Evil. There's fan theories that the sound represents Amelia's lack of sleep and how the TV sounds she hears are seeping into her psyche. Speaking of the TV, she's downstairs now. She's kind of watching it in a daze.
Yeah, she's like hardcore dissociating.
Yeah.
She is not there.
She feels her jaw, like her jaw hurts or something, and she sees the Babadook in the TV. Lots of weird imagery, and it seems like she stays up all night. The dog is laying by Sam and barking, and she, that morning, calls into work. They're very not happy about it, but she says she can't help that she's sick. Now that it's daytime, I feel like she feels it's okay to go to sleep, so she lays down in bed as Sam comes in complaining that he took the pills, but he feels sick and he needs to eat. She tries to ignore him, but he goes on and on about being hungry, and she just breaks. She eventually tells him, like, this escalates aggressively to her saying, if you're so hungry, you can go eat shit. He cries, running away.
So I'm going to start saying to you when you tell me you're hungry.
No. She lays back down. It's very obvious that the Babadook is possessing her now. She does eventually go to Sam, though, who is crying in the corner of his room. She apologizes, and he says he's not hungry anymore. She tells him that they just need to get out of the house and suggests going to Wally's. Now, I tried to Google this place to see like if it's real and what it is, but nothing specific about Wally's in Australia came up. I feel like it's a kid-themed restaurant, maybe like Chuck E. Cheese.
The first result I got is a place called Wally's Hot Dogs.
Yeah, but it seemed like it's much more than hot dogs.
I mean, I don't know. I'd love a hot dog.
You do have the diet of a child, so.
How dare you?
Back in the car, he asks where they're going because they're not going home, I guess. And she says she just wants to go for a drive. But then she sees the Babadook in the back seat. She also hears him and then sees roaches in her lap. So she freaks out and eventually crashes into another car. The guy from the other car comes out and he's like yelling at her. Then he yells at her even more when he realizes she has her kid in the car.
And she is fully in the wrong here, but this guy's a dick.
Yeah, she just drives off. She parks at home and the neighbor greets them, but she completely ignores her. Later, Sam finds his mother fully clothed in the tub. I would say like catatonic almost.
Yeah, and Sam in this scene, I said like he looks like he just realized he drove his mother insane. She picks him up and places him in the tub with her while she is just sitting in the tub. And this scene for me, it really seemed like this was when Samuel kind of realized, oh God, bad things are going down.
For me, this is where I start to shift and feel bad for him because I think it's clear that he's done this before, taken care of her before. And that's probably where all of this protection stuff comes into play because he's literally probably had to pick her up off the floor before.
Yeah, I definitely feel bad for him. Don't get me wrong. When I just spend the last hour crapping all over this kid, I do feel bad for him.
He suggests that he can call Auntie Claire, but she says that Claire doesn't want to see them anymore. And yeah, like you said, she stands up, picks him up, and places him with her in the tub. And he tells her that he doesn't want her to go away, and she says she's not going anywhere. Later, she comes up from the basement holding a violin. She sleeps with it. I guess her husband played the violin.
Yeah, I mean, if she got it from
Unclear.
the basement, it's fair to assume that it was her husband's.
She has weird dreams with like lots of whispering, and when she wakes up, the whispering continues. I really hate it, especially the yelling whisper. Like, you know what I mean? That like yelling whisper.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
It says there's something in the house, and because it's such a loud whisper, it actually really wakes her up. So it was a dream within a dream. And then she goes downstairs, but there's still, quote, indistinctly ghostly whispers. And that comes from our, what's that thing called?
Subtitles?
Subtitles?
Closed captioning.
Closed captioning. Yeah.
Yeah.
It called them indistinctly ghostly, which I love.
I know that's like a thing. People our generation, like you either need to watch everything with subtitles or you absolutely hate subtitles.
Yeah.
So we just outed ourselves as subtitle people.
Yeah, we're subtitle people.
Yeah.
She finds Sam in the kitchen on the phone, whispering to the neighbor, Mrs. Roach. He's asking if they can stay at her house. She grabs the phone away from him, like snatches it, and tells Mrs. Roach that everything is fine. And now her tone really changes. She sounds crazy. She takes the batteries out of the phone. She grabs a knife and cuts the phone line. Is this what I have to do to get you to be obedient, kind of thing? And he's very nervous about something getting in, like the Babadook coming. And then she's like, I'll make sure nothing gets in, and walks around with the knife still, just shutting and locking doors and windows. And my question is, why weren't all those things already shut and locked? I mean, come on.
There are plenty of areas where people just sleep with their doors and windows unlocked, and it's fine.
Well, they deserve it. She forces him to take another pill. Then she stays awake again.
She doesn't force him to take another pill, though.
No?
He uses sleight of hand, and he palms the pill to...
I didn't even notice. He's so good at it.
Yeah, so because she looks in his mouth, too, to make sure he swallowed it. She gives him the pill, and he goes to put it in his mouth, and they very quickly show a shot of him, like, holding it in his hand still.
Oh,
and then
I missed that, I guess.
Yeah, he did not take the pill because he knew something was up.
What a cute little magician.
Yeah.
Oh. She looks at him, and she finds him covered in blood very suddenly. Then she actually wakes up to him screaming. Sam is fine. She's standing over him with a knife, and then she puts the knife away.
Yeah, they show the shot of him dead on the couch, and it's a very jarring shot. It's a really good shot without being like cheap or exploitative.
Yeah.
And then she wakes up and he's sitting where he was dead, and she's like standing over him holding this knife, which is okay. Obviously, like, this movie is like, it shows like they have a good relationship, and maybe Sam sees things differently, but like for any child, like that is a life ruiner right there.
Yeah.
If I ever woke up with my mom holding a knife over me, I'd probably never sleep again.
Right.
I can't even imagine.
Well, he does fall asleep later, and the dog is laying over him. The dog knows this kid needs to be protected. He feels it. She's going through the channels, and she stops on a news story about a woman who killed her son. He was stabbed to death and found in the basement. The woman ended up attacking the officers, so she's dead too. In a window on this news story, she spots a woman who is her. It's a creepy smile. I hated it. I didn't
Very
like
creepy
it.
smile. They like zoom in on her.
Yeah.
And she's
Oof.
just smiling at the camera. And
Awful.
It's definitely creepy. It's a good shot.
Yeah. And then all the lights cut out. She looks over at the couch and Sam is gone. In muffled tones, he says, "Mommy, wake up." He's over her shoulder standing there, but his eyes are closed like he's sleepwalking. He heads to the basement and she tells him not to go. She follows and we find her husband, who's a hottie, by the way.
Yeah, you said, "What a soap opera dad."
Yes.
And I asked you what that meant, and you said, "He's just dreamy and attractive."
Yeah.
And I immediately felt ugly.
They hug and he says, "We can be together. You just need to bring me the boy." Now, when she goes into the basement, it's very bright, like we're in the doorway to heaven. But then when he says that to like bring me the boy, she starts to back away from him and it becomes very dark, like what it really is, which is dark.
And it also mirrors earlier in the movie when the Chancellor kept calling him the boy.
Right.
And she's like, he has a name. His name is Samuel.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was like a flag for her. Where she
Exactly.
was like, that's not his dad.
Yeah. He keeps saying, "You can bring me the boy. You can bring me the boy," until the voice changes and it gets scary. And then the voice says, "I think it's going to rain." And then that makes her run away, which we don't understand what that means at this point.
I think that was what her husband had said to
It
her,
is,
right?
but we don't know
Okay.
that yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
The lights are flickering now, and the Babadook comes out behind her. She runs upstairs. She blocks the door, but it comes in through the fireplace. And she's trying to crawl away, but it's a struggle. Like, you know, we've all had those dreams where you're like trying so hard to run from like whatever, but you can't run.
Yeah.
That's how her
It's-
body is moving on the floor.
It's like you're running through Jell-O. And this is such a good scene. And like, so
is.
you've got the scene with Samuel's body on the couch. You've got the news scene. You've got this scene, like bam, 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 back to back to back. These are such good scenes. And these scenes are what like make me understand why people love this movie.
Yeah.
Because those are really good, really effective scenes. But it's my problem is that like this is just too far into the movie and I don't care anymore. Like I already hate everyone.
Yeah,
you
like
know?
the switch is flipped very abruptly. Like
Yeah.
all of a sudden, this woman has spiraled and it is out of control. But I guess if you're suddenly possessed, then like that's exactly how it works.
Yeah, I mean it's just she has a full-on psychotic break.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's how it happens. I guess it happens fast, but we're an hour and 20 minutes into an hour 35-minute movie and it just got scary.
Right. The sounds, more Babadook sounds that are just loud and growling like a monster. It sounds awful. It comes down onto her back because, again, she's on the ground trying to like crawl away. It comes down onto her back, and all we see is an extreme close-up of her eye while she screams before it cuts. I don't know what that means. Again, the budget was $2 million. Like, I don't know what they were trying to show. Maybe the physical side of depression and like it just overcoming you completely. I don't know. But then she's in front of the TV. Her head is jerking around like she's not in control of her body. The dog runs out and Sam yells for the dog to stay with him. So Sam has been hiding this whole time. She kills the dog. I don't know if we want to go any further. Do you want to say what happened? Because I surely didn't watch.
Yeah, so, I'm obviously not going to go into great detail here. But Briana covered her ears and her eyes for this scene, and I don't blame you for that at all.
It's an ears cover, folks.
Yeah, the noises are just as bad as the visuals on it. Actually, really aren't that many visuals. The noises are worse. But yeah, so she's sitting, in that chair, kind of like in a trance. Then there's a close-up on the TV of a scary face. And then she turns off the TV and she looks at the dog who is standing next to the chair and barking. She chases him into the kitchen. She picks him up. Based on the sounds and kind of the way you see the top half of her arm, she starts choking him and then snaps his neck. And then you hear it drop on the floor. And then, as if this scene weren't bad enough already, she starts to kind of mess with her jaw a little bit, and she kind of makes this motion. She's been struggling with a toothache throughout this movie, and she reaches into her mouth and just rips her tooth out. And she just tosses it on the floor, turns around, walks away. There's blood coming out of her mouth. Samuel's at the top of the stairs, and I don't think he could have seen what she was doing from where he was, but there is no doubt that he heard everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. Love that. Didn't watch any of it. She finds Sam by the stairs and she runs up looking very angry. Sam runs away and locks himself in a room. She follows and up against the door, she kind of changes personality. She's back to mom, supposedly. So she's trying to get him to open the door and come out. And she's like, oh, Bugsy's hurt and he needs to go to the hospital. Like, you don't want him to die, do you? She pushes on the door. She eventually hangs off of the door frame, like the top of it, and kicks it open with her legs.
It's badass, honestly.
She's got that ghost strength.
Yeah. I wish depression gave me superpowers like that.
When she sees Sam, she shrieks. That's the only way I can describe it. And floats to him. And he wets himself. And it's really sad.
Yeah, and she berates him for it.
She says terrible things, making fun of him for wetting himself, calling him a pig. She says she wishes it was him who died, not her husband. Now, often in these movies with children, you're thinking, wow, this is really dark to say to a child. But Noah Wiseman, who played Sam, was removed from the set for certain scenes. Kent explained that when, quote, Amelia was abusing Sam verbally, we had Essie, Amelia, yell at an adult stand-in on his knees. I didn't want to destroy a childhood to make this film. That wouldn't be fair.
Love that. And when you're watching it, you can definitely tell any scene where she's being particularly shitty to him, they kind of just switch between cuts of their faces. They don't show them in the same frame.
Right.
And that's great. I am very glad he didn't have to hear these things. Even if he knows that it's different, I feel like that's still going to have an effect on you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and it reminded me of the child actor in The Shining who didn't even know what the film was about. And in fact, they did do the same thing for Noah. They told him that it's, quote, basically Sam is trying to save his mother and it's a film about the power of love.
That's nice. But this movie came out 8 years ago. So he's 16, 17 now.
Yeah.
He's seen this.
Yeah.
He's had to have seen this.
He knows
by
now. It's fine. Noah responds to his mother by saying, "You're not my mother." Good job, kid. And he runs away. He ends up hitting her with his weapons and they're having a physical fight, which is interrupted by Mrs. Roach coming to check on them.
Yeah, so his weapons, just to give you a brief look at them, there's two of them. There's one that's basically a crossbow that shoots darts, like darts from the game Darts. And he nails her in the arm with that. And then the other one, the one he was playing with earlier in the movie, is this entire contraption that he wears as a backpack. And it's got a swinging arm attached to it, and it chucks baseballs forward.
It's a backpack catapult.
Yeah, it's honestly, they're both pretty ingenious, and I think kind of speaks to how intelligent Samuel is.
Right. And creative.
Yeah, and he hits her with both, and she kind of just takes it in stride, but it's he saves the day a little bit.
She does open the door to talk to Mrs. Roach, but only a crack, and they talk briefly. Mrs. Roach is so sweet, saying how much she loves them, and she is sorry for talking so much about the husband. She'll stop doing that. I just want you guys to be okay. I'll do whatever I can. And we don't really see how that conversation ends. The next thing that we get is Amelia, approaching Sam in the kitchen. And it almost seems like everything is fixed because she starts apologizing and admits that she hasn't been well since her husband died. And then she says that we're going to go sleep at Mrs. Roach's house. But then she kneels down and says, I want you to see your dad. It's beautiful there. So she hasn't changed. Sam seemingly smiles, but then he stabs her in the leg with a knife.
Love that for him. He really takes a good hero turn at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
Like, you spend the first hour, 15 minutes like, oh my God, this kid is unbearable. But he's a sweet kid. He loves his mom, and he saves both of their lives.
On the way to the basement, which is where he's going, he just yells, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I know you're in there somewhere." When she follows him down, she falls on, or like trips on a line that he created on the stairs, like a trip basically, which
Like
makes her
Home Alone.
bang her head and then fall down the stairs. And I was like, oh, we've got a little Kevin McAllister on our hands. Neat. He hits her with something that knocks her out. And when she comes to, she's tied up, and he says that he's not leaving her. This part's really heartbreaking. He says, "I know you don't love me, but it's because the Babadook won't let her, but I love you."
It's funny how heartwarming this scene is.
Yeah.
Because this is a 7-year-old boy who just stabbed his mother and tied her up because she was going to try to kill him.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, it's so sweet.
Yeah, heartwarming. Amelia shrieks again and screams and wails and breaks her arms free and then chokes Sam. But he reaches for her face to like cup it, and it stops. It seems like she fights it out because her head starts going insane, where she should be dead from blunt force trauma because her head is on the basement floor. It's, you know, just bad effects of her head going really fast and all these rotating everywhere. Then she gets up on her hands and knees and just vomits black liquid. Ugh.
That's the worst part of depression for me.
The black liquid
Yeah,
vomit. Yeah.
vomiting up the black liquid. It's awful every time.
She seems okay. They go upstairs. At the stairs to go to the next level, Sam realizes something, and she's like, "What's wrong?" And he says, "You can't get rid of the Babadook." And an invisible force drags him up the stairs, thumps his body against the wall. She follows after it. She's screaming like, "What do you want?" There's a shadow that looked like her body, but then it turns black, and we see her husband. He tells her to keep breathing, 10 more minutes, and we're there. So we're like in the accident now. And this is when he says, "I think it's going to rain." She collapses to the floor. At this point, I was annoyed. I was like, is this going to be an unhappy ending? Because I feel like if you fight off the Babadook, aka grief, then you should be able to prevail. Like, what the hell? It's hissing, it's growling, but she stands up and she says, "You're nothing." The entire house rattles. There's cracks in the ceiling. Sam stands up behind her and she says, "This is my house. You're trespassing in my house," which I feel like was just for the trailer because it doesn't really make sense. And we see, this is where I wrote wingspan. We see the Babadook's wingspan. It flails out, and I swear to God, there's feathers.
You could definitely be right. Like I said, I honestly don't know.
It's a man in a top hat and also a giant bird. It tries to pull Sam away, and she screams with all her might. Poor Mrs. Roach must be like, holy fucking shit. It starts to back away. Then it comes back as its like person figure with those long fingers, but it falls to the floor growling. She approaches it, and Sam yells to not approach it. She leans down and touches it, then stands up and gasps, and the Babadook is shrieking and like invisibly running down the stairs into the basement, which is now locked again.
And you were right. I looked it up. He does have wings.
Ha! Suck it.
Good job.
Daytime. Amelia picks up Sam from Mrs. Roach's house after her shift at work. All seems well. She meets with the community service people again, so it's been 2 weeks. Behind them is a happy birthday banner. She says that they're having a party at 3. Sam shares that it's his first birthday party on the day, and the community service woman is like, "That's weird." And Amelia says, "Well, my husband died the day he was born." She's able to say it.
Yeah.
And Sam adds, "Yeah, on their way to have me." And Amelia smiles, saying Sam is just like his father, saying whatever is on his mind. Later, outside, they find some worms, and they go to the basement door. Sam says, "Am I ever going to see it?" And she says, "One day when you're bigger." She goes into the basement, sets down the worms on the ground, and it approaches her with a force, like the Babadook, making her body go backward. But she shushes it, saying, "It's all right. It's all right." It stops, it grabs the worms, and that's that. She goes back outside and asks how it was. She says, "Quiet today." This is like making me cry. This movie is good at the end, guys, okay? He does a little magic trick, and it's actually a good one with a real live bird. I don't know how he did that. She says, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Able to enjoy the day for the first time."
Yeah, and I do like the ending. You know, it really wraps up the metaphor because, you know, if you just like defeat the thing and then you're totally fine forever, that's not how grief or depression work.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
you have to tend to it. You have to feed it. Well, feed it, not really.
Not feed
but
it. It's just always there, and you
it's-
have
yeah.
to deal with it. And some days it's going to be, like when she says today it was quiet, like some days it's going to be roaring and terrible and awful, and some days it's like it's not even there.
Yep.
I got more emotional now than I did in the actual movie.
Well, you got your happy ending, though.
I know. What was your jump score?
I gave it a 2.
I gave it a
wasn't-
1.
Yeah, this wasn't really a jump scare movie.
Yeah. How about Nightlight?
So I gave it a 7. There's some good stuff here. The Babadook is just creepy looking. The sounds are really good. And the imagery in a lot of scenes is really effective. Like we talked about, the news scene, the scene of him on the couch. There were some really good stuff there. But I'm docking it a few points because some of the effects were just kind of bad to the point where they take you out of the movie. And it's almost silly for in that moment. So, you know, 7, because when it's on, it's good. It's just not on frequently enough. And then it kind of ruins a couple other moments.
So I think we do our Nightlight scores differently because I literally think about how I felt at night after watching this, and I gave it a 0. I didn't think about this movie again in terms of being scared at night.
That's good.
How about your horror buff score?
Well, so this is hard for me, right? To get a little more personal than I usually get on this podcast, I think the reason I don't like this movie is because of my personal experiences. You know, I have obviously, as I talked about earlier in this episode, I've struggled with depression. I've also been a child watching a parent struggle. I've been a child causing problems for my parent. This movie just kind of hits on so many parts of my life that I've struggled with that I can't separate the two. So I don't even think I'm going to give this a score because
It wouldn't be fair.
it wouldn't be fair. No, this is a movie that was well made. It certainly was original at the time, and it had some great performances. But I don't want to give it a great score because I have less than 0 interest in watching it again. And I don't want to give it a bad score because it's not a bad movie. So I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Wow, our first abstain. Okay, well, for Scaredy Cat score, again, was I scared? 2. This was not scary. Again, it was helpful to know what was happening going into it. Neophyte score, you know, I would say I would have given this an 8, right? Especially, I literally got emotional talking about it, and that's the first time this has ever happened. But you know what? We didn't need the dog, so you get a 6.
2 points for a dog.
Yeah. Dog equals 2 points.
I will.
Dead dog minus 2.
So I made my feelings clear about the dog. I think it's cheap writing. I do. But that said, they couldn't kill anybody in this movie. They couldn't kill anybody else. Like, you couldn't kill an actual person in this movie because then that's
There's no happy ending.
yeah, that's
She just
Amelia
killed
killing a
someone.
person.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I will say it was kind of the only option in this movie.
I
But
mean, we could just go without killing. We could try that.
that's no fun. I'm just kidding. I agree with you, though. I agree with you. You don't need to kill the dog. I'm fine with you giving it a 6. I'm just being contrarian because that's what I do.
Okay, well, feels good to be back. We're going to be
So
back
good.
again, you know, on schedule. So our next movie is going to be Lights Out, which I think we referenced when we talked about Ouija.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you'll probably recognize it if you remember Ouija.
The house.
The house is the same set from Ouija. I personally really like this movie. It's, you know, kind of going back to the beginning of this episode. It's a scary movie that is just kind of a scary movie. Like, it is supposed to be an allegory for depression because that's what everything is. But it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Okay.
The movie itself was based on a short.
This one was too, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, Lights Out is kind of divisive. You know, some people think, hey, it's great. Like, it's just a good, fun, scary movie. Other people think it was better as a short because it was kind of overstretched into an 80-minute movie.
Oh, it's only 80 minutes?
Yeah, it's very short.
Yay.
But I like it. I'm excited to rewatch it. I've seen it. I saw it in the theaters, and I've seen it once since. So I'm excited to watch it again.
I'm not. On brand. Thanks for listening to Go a Little Mad. Please be sure to follow or subscribe to us on your favorite pod platform and like us on Instagram and Facebook at Go a Little Mad Pod. Visit goalittlemadpod.com to continue the conversation about each episode. And you can help us spread the word with a quick review and 5-star rating, or grab some merch from our TeePublic site. Your sharing makes all the difference.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Sorry for the big delay. We're going to try to be much more regular from here on out.
Yeah, we're serious podcasters.
Start
guys.
taking our podcast fiber. It's a good poop joke to end the podcast.